Hey everyone, this is Molly. In this recording, I'm going to be going over chapters 15 and chapter 16, which are our last two chapters of content for our course. As a quick reminder, our final exam is not over the whole textbook and all of our content. It's just over the second half of our course. So all the chapters from the midterm on are the only chapters that are going to be discussed and you're going to be questioned on in your final exam. So chapter 15 talks all about transitioning from school to employment. So we're really going to be talking about how to best prepare students for their employment. There's been a history of transition starting in the 1960s with cooperative work study programs. These would be ran through local vocational rehabilitation agencies, and they would be programs that would provide academic, vocational, or job skills and social curriculum. So these would be places and programs that students with disabilities would go to, and they'd receive all of this instruction through these agencies. In the 1970s, there was a more focus onto career education, career tech programs. How can we provide specific career instructions for students while they're still in school? Then in the 1980s to the 1990s, there was really this emergence of the idea of transition. So transitioning from school life to a job life. This was fueled by different studies that came out that were citing that students with disabilities, even when they were doing a work study program or a career tech program, were still not being hired as frequently as they should be. This was also fueled by community adjustment reports and this transition bridge model. This is the first version of this transition bridge model, and it is essentially a way to visualize from high school. In high school, we provide, let me go back. We provide no special services or time limited services or ongoing services. So we provide some type of service to get our students to employment. Sometimes it might be a time limited service. So maybe for 5 weeks, they'll do a in-job field experience or internship, or maybe it's an ongoing service. Maybe your student is in more of a job program with a job coach. I know Akron Public in their high school, they have a program. It's kind of like a career education course or a work study program, but it's students who are placed into internships or kind of jobs on the University of Akron campus, and they come and they do their job and they have a teacher, and their teacher works with them and coaches them, and then in the afternoons they go back to their high school and they do their academic work. So that would kind of be an example of an ongoing service. This Bridges model was revamped to include a couple different things. So now we have from high school, we have either we can provide ongoing special services, we can provide time limited special services, or we can provide generic services. So you notice that there's not an option for no special services. We must be providing our students with some type of service in their transition stage of school to their job. And instead of transitioning them to employment, we're transitioning them to community adjustment. So these three things help build our community adjustment: a nice residential environment, place that we live, employment, it's very important, and social and interpersonal networks. So, not just when we're talking about transition, we're not just focused anymore on making sure our students have a job and they can do their job successfully. We're focusing on how can we make sure that our students can adjust to live a good life in their community. Um, this is about the history of employment for people with severe disabilities. Offering choice and self-determination have led to increased opportunities for employment through different things like self-employment and customized employment. There's a huge issue surrounding the employment of people with disabilities. This is a video. I'm not going to play it right now because as I'm recording it, it will just not even play the audio, but I encourage you to watch this video. This is from a couple years ago. They were having a hearing on fair wages for Americans with disabilities, and there is a law right now, and I don't know the exact name of the law, but essentially there's a loophole in the law that permits companies and businesses to provide seek for a waiver to that allows them to pay individuals with disabilities less money than their employees without disabilities, which is extremely wrong and extremely discriminatory for people with disabilities. So this is just a really great, powerful video to watch discussing the damaging effects of this law. And I did some research, and as of right now, this is still a loophole that still exists. Um, and companies are unfortunately still discriminating against people with disabilities. So, when we're talking about this choice and self determination, there has been more recently emphasis on having self-employment, create having people with disabilities create their own businesses, work for themselves and run their own business, or more customized employment. There's a lot of places that specifically their mission is to hire individuals with disabilities and provide work for them. There's a local coffee shop in my community is founded by a family of their daughter who has disabilities, and they hire specifically other people with disabilities and give them the opportunity to work in a good, healthy environment. No, I'm not going to play that, but I do suggest that you go and view it. Transition. Our text says that transition is a coordinated set of activities for a student with a disability that's designed to promote a successful post-school adult life. Whereas transition services are a coordinated set of activities for a student with a disability that is designed to be within a results-oriented process. So thinking about services, that is thinking about how are we providing something to achieve results. When we talk about transition plannings, Indicator 13 requires that we improve transition services for our students. These are all questions that are asked when we are considering Indicator 13 and our students' transition services. So, is there appropriate measurable post-secondary goals? Is the post-secondary goals updated annually? Is there evidence that this goal is based on age-appropriate transition? Are the transition services in the IEP that reasonably enable the student to meet the goals? Do transition services include courses of study? Is there an annual IEP goal related to a student transition service and needs? Is there evidence that the student was invited to the IEP meeting? And if appropriate, is there evidence that a representative of an agency was invited? So these indicator requirements required schools to get better at transition services. And so these questions really led to, on our IEP, that specific section for transition goals for our students 14 years and older. So some of these indicators focus on age-appropriate assessment. Age-appropriate assessment gives us a way to identify our students' needs, strengths, and preferences for their life or for their job employment futures. Um, this provides information about students' and helps us identify specific skills that students need. This assessment also helps our students take charge in the transition process. Some formal assessments are things like maybe an adaptive behavior assessment, an aptitude test, an IQ test, a personality test. And more informal assessments are things like our interviews, observations, questionnaires, and any teacher designed tests. This assessment should be ongoing and continuous. We're always needing to collect more and more data about our students. These should also be student-centered. These assessments should occur in many places involve other people. Thinking about person-centered planning, we want to make sure that we understand and support the individual so they can become actively engaged and a contributing member of their community. So, this type of planning focuses on post-school outcomes and quality of life. So, these are steps that are suggested to follow when you're planning for person-centered instruction: choosing a facilitator, designing the planning process, holding the meeting, and planning and strategizing at the follow-up meetings. Some self-determination and student involvement. When we promote we need to be promoting our student involvement. These are different stages that walk through all about creating this self-determination and student involvement in the transition process. So the first stage is all about developing background knowledge. So you need to use your resources. Giving your students an IEP scavenger hunt can really help them understand their IEP and where everything is and how it looks. You can ask students to evaluate their own IEP. Ask them if they think it's good, if it's effective enough. And you can also have students listen or read their own IEP. And stage 2 is when you start planning for the IEP. You should help your students design their own vision statements that are placed in the IEP. Get students involved with the transition assessments. Have students invite team members to the meeting. So instead of you emailing everyone, you could also do that, but also have your student email or write a letter or personally ask to invite those other team members and involve students in planning for the meeting. In stage 3, drafting the IEP, you can have students write about their IEP meetings, reflecting on it afterwards, how they think it went. You can change statements into I will statements. So for example, if in an IEP it says Jason needs to develop appropriate skills, your student can work and take that statement and rephrase it as I will develop appropriate skills. Of course, this is a poor example because it is very generic, but this is an example of changing a statement of need into a statement of I will. You can also have students discuss their IEP with their parents and guardians. In stage 4, you meet to develop the IEP, and you can consider different options for your meetings. You should provide your students with opportunities for rehearsal. So prior to the meeting, say, okay, let's talk about how this meeting is going to go, or let's do a mock meeting. And then you can also have your student design different types of presentations to use during the meeting. Maybe they're doing a PowerPoint, um, or they made a Prezi or something, um, and all that. And then in stage 5 is implementing the IEP. You can have your students create an IEP fact sheet or IEP at a glance sheet. You can teach self-advocacy and self-recruitment skills. You can provide your students access to their IEP, and you can self-monitor and have students self-monitor and self-evaluate their progress and develop person-first progress reports. So all of these things and all of these stages are very specific steps that you can take to promote this self-determination for your students during this transition stage of their life. When we're teaching employment skills, we are asking ourselves the question of, where do I teach these skills? You can teach these skills in community-based instruction, CBI. This is when you go into the community and you explicitly teach this instruction. So maybe your student has a job at the grocery store. Community-based instruction would be you go with them to the grocery store and you do their job with them. School-based instruction, or SBI, is all housed in the school. So again, this could be like a career tech program. This could also be a school-based enterprise or an on-campus job. The example I talked about previously would be an example of an on-campus job. Or maybe students might have a job where they work up in the main office and they have different types of tasks from the main office. School-based enterprises are things that schools develop for their students to practice employment skills. I remember at my high school, they had a coffee bar in the morning, and the coffee bar was run by the students from the more moderate to severe disabilities classroom. And they ran this enterprise, and they took in cash and all that great stuff. So using school-based enterprises can be a very fun and successful way to teach employment skills for our students. So thinking about the where of instruction and thinking about CBI in the community, there are some different things we can do. We can do job shadowing. We can do internships, apprenticeships. We can have our students volunteer or do community service projects or service learning. We can also encourage a mobile work crew. This is a kind of job where um, they a group of people or a work crew move from site to site, performing essentially the same job. So an example of this would be like a landscaping company. So your job is you ride the mower to mow the lawn, and you do it at one site, and then you're mobile, you move to another site to do it again. Another way is paid competitive employment. How we can provide instruction, we can use things like whole task chaining all of the different skills together, or like a task analysis. We can include different types of time delay responses. We can use audio prompting and self-instruction. Some things that our self-instruction talks about was teaching the importance of problem solving. Did next now. So in this example strategy, you would say, okay, I just did this. Next, I will do this. Now I'm going to do this. A what where strategy, and then an interactive did next now strategy. Some examples of supported employment. Some of our students might have the ability to have employment, but they might need some support with it. An individual placement model would be one where your student works directly with a job coach. A mobile work crew, again, you'd be moving from job site to job site. An enclave model is a group at an integrated workplace. So at a workplace, you'd be working with a group of other individuals with disabilities. The small business model, that was like the example that I had talked about earlier. And then natural supports. These are supports that can be provided through organizational supports, physical supports, social service supports, training supports, community supports, or personal and family supports. All right, we're going to move into chapter 16. This is a promise of adulthood. Moving from high school or school to adulthood is different for all of our students. So some different dimensions of adulthood include giving autonomy, the ability to control yourself and make your own decisions, having self-sufficiency both in economic ways and in emotional ways, having self-determination, giving more active assertion of your individuality and independence. This is also rational maturity and personal freedom to make specific choices about how to live your life. And then the dimension of completeness. This, our text talks about, is the stage where you are of preparation achieved. So I feel like right now I'm in the dimension of completeness right now because I'm settled into my career. I'm into the second year of my career out of college. I prepared my whole life to get to this point. I feel complete right now. You might not be in this dimension. You might, but you might also not. You're on the cusp of student teaching, getting close to graduating. There's might not be a state of completeness, but that is one of the dimensions of adulthood. Some of the dimensions of membership include citizenship and affiliation. It is very important to us as humans to belong to something. And when we have citizenship or affiliation or both, we feel like we belong to something. We feel membership to our community, our family, our groups. We feel that connection. For some of our students transitioning to adulthood, these might not always be as clear cut as they are in our lives. There's also a lot of change that happens when we transition from high school to adulthood. A lot of things change in our life. A lot of things are changing around us. Our friends are also changing. So there's lots of changes happening as well. For our students with disabilities, there's this concept of denying adulthood. So, um, research talks about this as unending childhood. This is when you refer to as your mental age for the rest of your life. You might be a 21-year-old adult male, but your mental age might be 5 years old. This would be a state of unending childhood. You feel stuck in childhood. There might be a lot of unfinished transitions that are happening. Transitions that start, but they don't finish, things that don't get followed through. And there might be unhelpful services. So, our text talks about the concept of clienthood. So, after moving from student, instead of moving into adulthood, you move into clienthood. This is the feeling of there's someone taking care of you. You are a client of someone else. Um, and you're not independent. You're not an adult. You are a client and you feel that as clienthood. There might be a feeling of anonymity, you feeling unknown, or a feeling of chronicity, which is systematic denial of lifelong change or growth. So we really need to make sure that we're not letting our students get stuck into any of these because our students deserve to have achieved life adulthood. This is when there's support, and it's just the right amount of support that our students need. Some community-based arrangements can provide these supports. Some ways that adulthood can be supported is by giving natural context supports, informal and formal support resources, giving user-defined supports, local character, and universal eligibility. All right, that is all for chapters 15 and 16. Please be sure to complete the discussion question for this, and make sure you go back to the earlier slide and watch this very compelling video. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Thank you.